Good evening. If you desire to address the City Council during the meeting tonight, please complete a request to speak form available at the entrance and present it to the City Clerk. Speakers will be called upon at the appropriate time. This time I will call to order and convene the City Council and City Council as successor agency to the Community Redevelopment Agency for May 30th, 2017. This is a special meeting. We have an invocation tonight by Pastor Alger from Azure Hills Seventh-day Adventist Church. If you would please stand for the invocation and remain standing and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance immediately after.
Good evening. Let's bow our heads for prayer. Father, again this evening, we have just spent some time this weekend remembering those who have given their lives in order to serve this country. We now turn to the needs of this particular community and the individuals who have committed their time and their talents to serving this community. We ask your blessing upon the City Council tonight, that as they consider their responsibilities, you may grant them wisdom, that you would bless all those who serve and live in this community is our desire, and so we surrender to you in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Please join me in the pledge to our nation's flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Pastor Alger. May we have roll call, please, Madam City Clerk?
Councilmember Reiners.
Present.
Councilmember Hussey.
Present.
Councilmember Wilson.
I'm here.
Mayor Pro Tem Robles.
Present.
Mayor McNaveau.
Present.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. We have no special presentations tonight. We do have one item on the consent calendar, and that is to waive full reading of ordinances on the agenda. Is there anyone that would like to move the consent calendar?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second that. Thank you. Please vote.
Motion passes unanimously with Councilmember Reiners, Hussey, Wilson voting yes, Mayor Pro Tem Robles voting yes, and Mayor McNaveau voting yes.
Thank you. Next item is public comment. This is an opportunity for members of the public to comment on any items not appearing on the regular agenda. Is there anybody here tonight who would like to speak on public comment? All right, seeing no takers, I'll close public comment and bring it back to City Council. This is time for council member communications, and I'll start with Council Member Brian Reiners.
Nothing to report.
Thank you. Council Member Bill Hussey.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to say I'm a grandfather now. She just had my daughter had her baby, little Georgia James, and 7 pounds, 13 ounces, 21 inches long. And then on the way over here, my truck broke down, so we're getting above it. I just want to wish my son and my daughter-in-law all the best. Thank you.
Congratulations to you and your son and daughter-in-law. Councilmember Doug Wilson.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd just like to comment on the Memorial Day celebration. I thought it was excellent. It was put together just as smooth as silk. Everything ran exactly the way it was supposed to, as well as there was a great appreciation among the masses. It really warms your heart when a community comes together and recognizes the sacrifices of those that have been before us. It's really no substitution for the kind of love that was expressed in those sacrifices, and so I really appreciate everybody's efforts. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Wilson. Mayor Pro Tem Robles.
Yes, Mayor. I also want to ask if you will indulge me and adjourn in the memory of my uncle, Renato Cubillos. My uncle Renato was inducted into the U.S. Army in Needles, California in 1948. He was a prisoner of war for 201 days at Stalag 2A in New Brandenburg, Germany. He retired as a career Air Force Master Sergeant. He was stationed at Norton about 1970 to 1980. We were very proud of him, not only for his accomplishments, but also he took a Japanese bride, and together they had a child named June, who graduated valedictorian at San Antonio High about 1977, and went on to graduate and work at MIT. So my uncle at age 95 passed away in Boston, Massachusetts, and I just wanted to honor him with this resolution for our adjournment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, and that's a wonderful story. That was your grandfather? Great
Uncle.
Great uncle. All right, thank you so much. And I have no report for this evening, so we will move on in our agenda to no public hearings, no unfinished business, so we'll move on to new business. First item of business tonight is the Child Care Service Program. May we have a staff report, please?
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem, City Council. At this time, I think our PowerPoint projector is having technical difficulties. Hopefully, you were provided with a copy of one titled Conclusion of City Provided Child Care Service.
Mine looks like this,
Yes, I apologize.
so it is not landscape. All right, thank you.
I was provided with a different copy. This staff report supports council goal number 1, ensuring our fiscal viability through the continuous monitoring of revenue receipts and expenditure disbursements against approved budget appropriations. And unfortunately, since yours is two-sided, you won't be able to see the numbers that I was going to explain. That second sheet
Is it possible, Mayor, for us to recess for about 5 minutes so we can fix that? It's important for you to see the PowerPoint slide.
All right, we will take a technical difficulty break for 5 minutes.
Thank you.
All right, we are back from our recess, tentatively.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem.
Good
We
evening,
apologize for the inconvenience.
Good evening, Assistant City Manager Fortune. Please continue.
Take 2. So before you again is the staff report requesting the approval of the termination of city-provided child care services and the elimination of the child care department effective at the end of the workday on June 30th, 2017, and to authorize the layoff of the child care personnel, also effective at the end of the workday on June 30th, 2017, and instruct and authorize the city manager to issue layoff notices. So what we've done was go back and look at the history of child care, and I believe we provided a larger copy. For those that were here prior to 1213, from 0708 to actually 1112, the child care department was part of the general fund. So when they would do revenue and expenses, because it was part of the general fund, there was no loss that was being shown. So when we pulled that out and put it on this chart, if you look at 0708 all the way to 1112, all those negative numbers were being carried by the general fund at the time. Yeah, that cost was being absorbed by the general fund because they were part of that fund. And so I don't necessarily know if the powers that be knew at the time that this is how much the general fund was contributing to sustain the child care fund. Now in 1213, I think the city council at the time wanted to see if the child care was self-supporting. At the time, they did raise the rates about 13.5%, as shown on package page 4. And if you look at the child care performance, they were actually to the good that year. Every year after that, there were subsequent raises, as shown again in, we summarized it in packet page 4. But if you look at the revenue and expense, it was still not enough to cover the increases. Now, in 1314 and 1415, they were still minor. They were not big. What happened in 1516? That is when CalPERS decided that the unfunded accrued liability was no longer going to be a portion of payroll. Before, it was a percentage. Let's assume that was 10%. If our salaries went down, that payment went down. When they realized after a few years they were not receiving what they should, they decided to make that a flat fee. That first year, it was $260,000. This year, it is $290,000. In 1718, we've received the bill. It is close to $340,000. Of that $340,000, child care's portion is a little close to $160,000. So if you look at 1516 and 1617, that portion on that chart is the unfunded, the bulk of it is the unfunded accrued liability that is attributable to the personnel in the child care department who are actually at Tier 1, those who were hired prior to 2013. So as we are showing, because of our CalPERS liability, the child care department is unable to sustain itself, and we are always, the general fund will always have to make a contribution. So what we wanted to show you just on the history, I wanted to show you that we have our HR personnel looking into what reduction we would be having for workers' comp and liability, just because we are reducing our staffing, and they hopefully will get back to us by next week. We do have a loss of expense and revenue for overhead. Instead of overhead, that should be overhead. Again, the overhead cost allocation that we were collecting this year, prior to that, you can see it was right around the $200,000 range. This year, we lowered it to $160,000. That is because of the number of students that they were able to enroll, because we increased the rates this year. And yes, we are assuming that that will also result in a reduction in unfunded liability, because we will have so many that are terminating from the CalPERS retirement system. So what we are requesting tonight, okay, was to Now, before I actually say that, what you had requested us to do was make childcare self-supporting, or find an alternative to city-operated services where the general fund would not have to make any sort of contribution. The next staff report that Mr. Duffy will be presenting will address those options. But for tonight, in relation to the Child Care Services Department, we are asking that council authorize the termination of the employees, process the leave payouts, and again, as Mr. Duffy maybe will be explaining in more depth, all employees have been offered employment with a new child care operator, one that we are actually presenting a lease agreement with to you. Yeah. And the action tonight is an independent action and represents the council's decision to no longer subsidize the child care program. That ends my report. I'll be happy to answer any questions the council may have in relation to the termination of the provision of child care services by the city.
Thank you, Ms. Fortune. What questions does council have of staff at this time? All right, seeing none, I will open to public comment. Seeing no takers for public comment at this time, I will close public comment and bring it back to council for consideration of a motion.
I move the recommendation to approve the termination of city-provided child care services and the elimination of the child care department effective at the end of the workday on June 30th, 2017, and to authorize the layoff of the child care personnel also effective at the end of the workday on June 30th, 2017, and instruct the city manager to issue layoff notices.
And Mayor, I second that motion.
All right, thank you. Please vote.
Motion passes unanimously with council members Reinars, Hussey, and Wilson voting yes, Mayor Pro Tem Robles voting yes, and Mayor McNabb voting yes.
Thank you. We'll move to item 2, which is a child care services lease agreement with Family Services Association. May we have staff report, please?
Good evening, Mayor. For the record, G. Harold Duffy, City Manager. So this is a child care services lease agreement with Family Services Association. And this lease actually represents about a year's worth of work the staff has put together. At the end of last fiscal year, at the beginning of this fiscal year, staff has given direction, as Ms. Fortune mentioned earlier, to seek ways to make child care affordable and unsubsidized by the general fund. So the city talked to several nonprofit agencies, marketed our program, had several visitors visit the site. We had FSA, Family Services Agency, visit the site, and they were very interested, and they wanted to meet with us. And through several months of negotiation, we have come up with the following contract. So a lease agreement is a 3-year lease agreement, option to purchase on June 30, 2018. So in the first year, FSA has the option to purchase. If they decide to purchase the building, the monthly rent will be $10,000 per month for the first year. The second year will be $11,000 per month, and the third year will be $12,000 per month. The purchase price will be $1 million for the building and all of the assets inside of the building. That's based upon a approval that we received several years ago when the previous council took action to investigate about child care services. The maintenance of the building. The city will be responsible for repairs over $750 during the lease agreement, and Family Services will not be responsible for accumulation of bills over $5,000. Part of the agreement also calls for Family Services Agency to offer our current employees a job at their current salary. And the employees must be retained for at least 90 days. And the little line at the bottom that teachers create stability. So FSA is very well aware that the reason why we have such loyal customers is because of the consistency of having the permanent teachers on site. This actually is a picture of a meeting where we had dinner with FSA and the child care employees. The employees were encouraged to submit their applications. They were also informed about the benefits that the FSA has, and they talked about the desire for FSA to keep them on board, to create that stability, and to actually grow the program. And so the employees had several questions, and it was a very good meeting. They were explaining the FSA family, and they really opened it by saying, we'd like you to be a part of the family. And so it was a really very positive meeting for the employees. Employees had a few questions. I believe that they're currently submitting their applications, and they'll be moving forward. With that, I'm available for any questions.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Duffy. Questions of staff at this time? Councilmember Wilson.
This might be slightly off base, but what is our equity position in the building that's for sale?
100% we have equity.
Yeah.
We don't owe anything.
Any other questions at this time? All right. Seeing none, I will open to public comment. I have no request for public comment at this time, so I will close public comment and bring it back to council for consideration of a motion.
Motion for approval of the lease agreement with Family Service Association, substantially similar form to the attached lease agreement.
Second.
If I may, the reason for we put the language in is substantially a form. The attorney for FSA hasn't reviewed it yet. There may be a few tweaks. As long as we do not change any of the main terms, we'll go ahead and with your authorization, approve it.
Is that acceptable? Yes. Okay. And you were about to second. Are you going to do that?
Yes, second.
No? All right. So I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion or questions based on Mr. City Attorney's input? If not, please vote.
Motion passes unanimously with council members Hussey, Wilson, Reinaris voting yes, Mayor Pro Tem Robles voting yes, and Mayor McNabb voting yes.
All right, thank you. All right, Mr. Betro, we look forward to working with you. Thank you. And on to item 3, which is the introduction of proposed budget for fiscal year 2017-18.
Good evening, Mayor. I'll be presenting this item also. This is the City of Grand Terrace proposed budget for 2017-18. In developing the budget, the staff moved to examine the following city goals based on the 2030 vision plan to ensure its fiscal viability, to maintain public safety, to promote economic development, and to develop and implement successful partnerships, and to engage in proactive communications. So the council received the budget packet tonight. Also within the packet, there's a list, as a staff report, a list of the future dates for the deliberation. So the item tonight was basically an introduction of the budget and for me to kind of just briefly go over the transmittal letter. So I'm sure by now we're all familiar with this chart. This is the chart that shows our long-term financial performance. And as you can see, we are being very consistent in terms of moving up to a sustainable and healthy budget. And just to reiterate, the definitions of unsustainable or insolvent budget is when your expenditures exceed your revenue. A vulnerable budget is when your revenue your expenditures do not exceed your revenue, but you don't have anything available for a rainy day fund. A sustainable budget is that your revenue exceeds your expenditures, and you have that 2-month rainy day emergency gap. A healthy budget is actually your revenues exceed your expenditures, and they've done it for a repeated number of years, and you continue to grow way above your 2-month rainy day fund. So I'm happy to present to the council a balanced budget for 2017-18. The budget, the general fund budget is $5.08 million, and the expenditures are approximately $5.06 million. We do maintain the 2-month fund balance. There are some things that we'll have to go over during the budget deliberations regarding personnel operational changes. So if you remember, several months ago, we went through and we decided that we would want to bring the Willdan financial contract in-house. There were 2 Willdan positions that we left in this year's budget that we will be bringing into the new budget 17-18. Those 2 positions are recommended to be analyst positions. They support the payroll, processing, there'll be personnel actions, and so on and so on. So that doesn't affect the savings that we talked about in this year. It's going to be addition to that, but it's ultimately the overall savings. It's cheaper to bring in the Willdan contract than it is to have it currently the way it is today. And so we'll be having that discussion. In addition to that, we also requested that within the budget, we take the maintenance worker 1 positions. We have 2 of them, and we'd like to move them to a maintenance worker 2 position. The maintenance worker 1 position really is an entry-level position. The maintenance worker 2 is based upon experience and longevity. You can, in a satisfactory performance evaluation, you can be moved to a maintenance worker 2. In addition to that, it also allows us, wherever we have a vacancy, to hire at the 2 and get more experienced workers and be competitive in terms of the salary. In addition to that, we've also requested that we take the part-time office specialist that's in the code enforcement, planning, building services, and make it a full-time position. As a result of that, we will be losing both of our interns in this particular year's budget. I believe that with the administrative staff that we're adding and with the assistant city manager and the the executive assistant, the need for need for interns is no longer necessary at this point in time. On to law enforcement services. This budget also represents a proposed increase in public safety services of $50,000 above the normal cost of living increases added annually. Although the 50% increase is only represents about one-sixth of what was recommended by our sheriff's department to add that additional 40-hour officer. As we have done in past years, we'll be monitoring the budget in the first quarter and the mid-year and looking at any savings at that point and coming back to the council to ask to support that. In addition, the council also indicated they wanted to examine alternative ways to provide increased public safety services, including community service officers, increasing participation in neighborhood watch, and also discussing alternative funding sources that might be available. As the transmittal letter indicates, that this year is going to be a significant year for us as we move away from planning into the implementation stage. The budget this year, as in most years, it included, for the last several years, it included the concept of transferring or selling our redevelopment properties. At this point in time, 95% of the properties that we owned in redevelopment are either leased, are obligated, or have been sold off to private developers. So now comes the point in time where the city is going to be implementing projects versus planning to implement projects. In this particular budget, you'll see that we have, although this year's funding for the Slurry Seal project is scheduled this year, but it will be actually accomplished in the new fiscal year. In addition to that, we have $1 million in the budget for the second phase of the program, which is Slurry Seal and road reconstruction. In addition to that, we anticipate the construction of the dog park in this coming fiscal year, and along with several other projects that we have. We also are going to be getting to the point where we're going to be processing the Lewis Group's specific plan. And as you know, that project is 54 acres, and for the Lewis project, the city owned, but the total specific plan area is a $200 million project. In addition to that, we're also going to be seeing some construction for the I-215 interchange, that $92 million project. And also, staff will need to execute some other projects, including about $260,000 in equipment replacement, council upgrades for the camera for Channel 3, and also maintenance of vehicles, web page upgrades, and electronic records management system. Also, this represents the first full year that the staff in over 9 years will be having a 40-hour work week. And so we believe that we'll be able to make considerable enhancements in services based on those additional hours. Also, based on the 2 staff reports we recently approved, the Child Care Services Program will no longer be a part of the city's annual budget. In addition to that, we are going to be spending additional proceeds in bond proceeds, redevelopment bond proceeds. We received authorization from the Department of Finance. We've included that in this year's budget. We'll be coming back to the council with a list of programs to be able to spend that money on. It's really interesting. We have the bond proceeds, and now we can go back to our redevelopment plan, which is very broad, and we can bring back a list of items which the council can actually approve, fund, and we can actually get going immediately. In addition to that, we're going to be following the ROPS, last and final ROPS, which will then give us access to an additional $3 million that we'll be able to, once again, implement the city's redevelopment plan. Also, as the council has moved forward with approving the implementation of an EIFD, and so we'll be moving forward working with the county to see if they want to join us with the EIFD, and also moving forward with the process to see if we can get our designated area accomplished. In addition to that, we have several other programs, including, as the budget item says, the first line on this is that this is our 39th year of incorporation. And what comes next is our 40th year. And what we've asked in this particular budget is that the council earmark $10,000 to create a 40th anniversary committee to start planning for events for the entire year. So this would, starting in January 2018 and commencing on our birth date. So we would use community development block grant funds, community benefit funds, and those funds over the last couple of years we've identified $25,000 each year. We spent a total of about $22,000 for the entire 2 years. So we believe that there's ample resources there to be able to move forward with that. So we've been having that discussion with the council. Also, we want to implement an events committee that whenever we have events at the city parks or any city facility, what our goal would be is if the event's going to have more than 100 people, that the city staff and the sheriff's department actually sit down with that group to determine what's going to actually happen at that day. Our interest, obviously, is to make sure that we protect the city property. The other interest that we have with having the sheriff available is to ensure that there's adequate safety for our citizens as they go to our parks and our events. We've seen some things happen where nothing, significant, but where we are not aware of all the aspects of an event. And if we're able to do that by having the sheriffs there and staff there, we can properly prepare for that. We estimate that we spend somewhere between $300 and $1,000 just in setup and takedown for these particular events. And so by having the special events committee, having people come forward when they submit their application, if they're going to be, if the event's going to have more than 100 people, we believe that that would be a great way to ensure that the experience is enjoyed by all. And what I've learned over the last year and a half is that it doesn't matter if it's an event put on by somebody else. If it's in the city facility, we own it. And so for us to be able to be there to help to make sure that it is an enjoyable event, that would be what we'd really like to do. And so with that, I'm available for any questions, but certainly we'll be going through the budget department by department starting on June 13th.
Councilmember Wilson, I know you had some questions.
Assistant City Manager Cynthia, this is probably just a technical issue in relation to the way we show things, but I have a question in relation to packet page 26 and 27. If I was Joe, regular guy in the city of Grand Terrace, I would look at the general fund, which is fund item 10, and I would see that there is a balanced budget that is represented within 20 grand, which is actually good, to our good. But what confuses me is from 11, line item 11 all the way down to 70, I see a surplus or proposed use of fund balance $1,874,040 in the red. And so could you please explain that for us dummies that don't do the, is this a cash flow issue or what is this?
Yes, sir. I highlighted in red so that you could all see that. If we look at Fund 11, sir, yeah, the revenue that is generated in that year is not sufficient to cover the expenses in that year. Therefore, we are requesting that City Council approve the use of fund balance. What I was unable to put in this report is actually in your budget book, but when I do the adoption, it will be. So.
And so the nature of that particular fund is, because it's the street fund, and so you constantly collect money. And so what we're asking to be able to do is actually do a project. And so what she's basically saying is there's a street fund has a fund balance that we will be bringing in. And so it's not really going to be a deficit because it's.
No. So, and like I said, next time we do the reports, we'll make sure we have this. If you can refer to your budget book, budget page 34 and 35. This will list every fund's fund balance. The first column I do start with is our audited numbers, June 30th, 2016. We provide you with our projected revenue and expense. We project a fund balance for each fund ending this June. Then we propose revenue and expenses for next year and then show a remaining fund balance. So if we were again to look at the street fund, again, these are development impact fees that we receive from developers. Its fund balance is $1.3 million in 2016. For 16-17, we are estimating to receive $100,000 in development impact fees. We are not spending this year. So technically, at the end of June, that is a $1.4 million balance.
This is wonderful. It's just that it looks like magic money to regular guys.
Yeah.
I was asking because I see revenues over in this book that we received on Monday on page 26, where it shows $91,900 worth of revenues projected through fiscal year 2017 to 18, and then I show expenditures of $1 million against that. You can understand my confusion.
Yes, yes, sir.
Actually, I understand the regular guy's confusion. To me, this is what we're talking about in the overall is the cash flow. In other words, the cash flow gets spread. We keep getting revenue in, and we either do spend it or we don't spend it. But in the large part of this, we've got, 4 columns to deal with rather than like 14 of them?
Yes, so next time when we do the adopted report, I will try to incorporate it and simplify it so that the beginning fund balance is in front of the 1718 column. And then it'll show, how much of fund balance is requested to be used and what the balance will be after.
Okay, so it's not magic money.
No, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
For the street fund, this is actually cash, because this is money we've already collected from all the developers. They've already paid all these fees.
Any other questions of staff at this time? Councilmember Hussey?
Yeah, on packet page 28 for the personnel request, reclassification, 2 maintenance workers, 1 position to maintenance worker, 2 positions. 1, how long have the maintenance 1 workers been here? And 2, does it warrant for them to get the pay increase with us being a contract city mostly? They're doing mostly contract work here.
So the staff report says reclassification, but my transmittal letter, which will help, and I was talking to Ms. Fortune about that, we are not reclassifying the employees. We are just going to be moving the positions to maintenance worker 2. We will underfill the positions with the maintenance worker 1 until they meet the criteria, which is they either have the experience and they've got a satisfactory performance evaluation. Part of our problem is, I think we're going to lose one of our guys immediately. Our salaries, our maintenance worker 1 salary isn't competitive to other cities. And then when we hire people with 8 years of experience and we bring them in as a maintenance worker 1, we just can't compete. And so we've had a couple of times, we lost someone last year. His comment was, man, if you had a 2 position, I could stay. And someone had been there for 3 years. So, and usually the case, the maintenance worker 1 is entry level, you get skills, and then you become a maintenance worker 2. So in this particular case, we're not reclassifying. We are going to give us some flexibility when they become permanent employee, when they become off probation permanent employees, and they have the experience with the satisfactory evaluation.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions at this time?
Just a couple of comments.
Councilmember Reiners?
I shared Councilmember Wilson's concern when I first saw this. I think maybe red was just an unfortunate color choice.
We have the brackets and the red.
I popped that open and saw rows of red, but I figured it out eventually, but I can understand what he's saying about someone reading that on the website or somewhere, how that could get out. And then on the maintenance workers, I'm in full 100% support of that. That goes along with what I had been kind of hoping for, is some love and attention to the first floor, and also the reclassification of the office specialist. But that's something for the deliberation phase of this process.
Any other questions? Mayor Pro Tem?
No, you've done a good job explaining where we're at, and I'm looking forward to seeing what you're going to recommend as far as the $289,000, the bond proceeds. So we had an interesting meeting today that you might consider. All right, thank you.
Councilmember Wilson?
Just 2 questions. And you don't have to show it to me, I'll take your word for it. I just wanted to find out, I know we have a long-term emergency management plan, and I wasn't 100% sure where we have that programmed in the 17-18 budget.
Our planning development director can answer that particular question. Where we are, it's usually, the EOP usually sits in the city manager's
office, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Amount of money roughly?
I think it's 10, isn't it?
Give us a minute to find that, sir.
Oh, okay. Mr. City Manager, while we're looking for that, my question centers around the EFID, which, as you know, I'm in greatly support of. Is there any tentative description of what the EFID is going to mean to the county and us? Is it it's not, I can't say it's a park thing, but what else would it, how's it pinpointed, I guess, is the question.
Sure. So part of the proposal that COSMA presented to the council was a boundary. We actually have that boundary in the Midas booklet, and it's online also. But what they did was they gave us a list of potential items. The revenue was available, I believe it was $15.8 million that might be available, and it consisted of a wish list that I believe the council went through the exercise and completed the list. It included road improvements, sidewalks, community facility, library expansion. It was a list of things that we provided them. I can certainly bring that back to the council. And one of the things is that, so COSMA will be meeting with the county and then meeting with the city and the county to see if the county would be interested in partnering with us. Because once again, I think the county understands that when we have 50 acres of land that has nothing on it, it's not worth very much. But if the area has $200 million in improvements, then they're going to get money, and they should partner with us to be able to do that. So interesting enough, though, one of the things that we forget about is that, so the EIFD would actually represent a split. So if we were getting $10, $5 would go to EIFD, and $5 would go to our general fund. Mm-hmm. And the general fund's more flexible to do what you want versus the commitment of the EIFD funds for particular programs.
Well, the reason why I asked is because I know it has highly to do with, with the county what the county would anticipate, mm-hmm. as well as us. In other words, it's more than one party involved. And I've seen how special districts work really well. All you have to do is write up to 215, or actually 15, I guess, anyway, and head towards DeVore, and you can see everything on the basically left side of the road. Mm-hmm. And I've been in one of those seminars, so I understand the concept. It's just I was wondering if we'd settle. When we talk about a library, that's one thing. When we talk about something that everybody at the county can buy into, that's when it becomes a partnership.
Well, I'll bring those items back as part of the budget discussion so you can see where we are. And these are just, I think there's concepts in terms of what the assessment might be, but certainly that's available to change. And as you said, when you have discussions with the county, it's now a two-party discussion.
Thank you.
Director Molina.
Yes, Madam Mayor, thank you. Councilmember Wilson, on page 75 of the budget book, the Emergency Operations Program has $3,200 budgeted. And I can tell you that the hazard mitigation plan that the city received a grant for, the council should expect to see that before them in June, and with a recommendation to authorize us to submit it to the state for review.
Mayor, if I might also add that, during our community meetings and our stakeholder meeting, it was pretty clear that the respondents said they did not know very much about our emergency operation plan in terms of nearest shelter, do they have a plan, where to go, and they said yes, they would like to have more information in that particular area. But we'll bring that survey back as part of the deliberation so you can see what the results were for that.
Thank you for the information.
Any other discussion or questions at this time? If not, the recommendation is to receive and file the proposed budget for fiscal year 17-18 and begin budget deliberations for proposed budget for fiscal year 17-18. Do we need to provide any direction at this time for you to come back to us?
No, not unless you have something specific you want to.
Mr. City Attorney, do you want us to vote on receiving and filing?
That would be the appropriate action, Madam Mayor.
All right. So receive and file a proposed budget for fiscal year 2017-18. Please vote.
Motion passes unanimously with council members Reiners, Hussey, and Wilson voting yes. Mayor Pro Tem Robles voting yes, and Mayor McNamara voting yes.
Right. And Mr. City Manager, do you have any further communications for us at this time?
Yes, Mayor, I do. Actually, the thing is, I don't really, but we talked about.
You don't you?
I don't. Staff talked about what time we were going to get out, and I said 7:30. So I feel obligated to talk for.
So you have about 40 minutes worth that you want to talk to us about.
Right, no, actually, I have nothing. Thank you, Mayor.
All right, thank you. All right, at this time, we will adjourn. We will adjourn in the memory of.
Renato Cubillos.
Thank you. And we will adjourn to our next regular city council meeting, which will be held Tuesday, June 13th, 2017, at 6 p.m. Agenda item requests must be submitted in writing to the city clerk's office no later than 14 calendar days preceding the next meeting. Thank you all for your time and discussion this evening. Thank you, staff members, for putting together this nice little budget book. Look forward to further discussions on it. We are adjourned.